he started buying firearms and ammunition and a bulletproof vest. And, and his logic behind that was that, well, you don't know what's coming. We got to be ready. We got to be ready.
This is the Q Drop podcast, and these are the stories of families torn apart by QAnon. You and I don't know each other yet. I'm Courtney Hurd. I'm a blogger. I'm a writer during the day, mostly for businesses. I'm a mom. I am a food lover. I'm a dog lover. And I'm a wife. And I also happen to have parents who have fallen down the QAnon rabbit hole. I know that there are a lot of you out there who are experiencing something similar with somebody that you love and care about. And I know that you understand how challenging and heartbreaking it is, and how sometimes it actually is relationship ending. It is in that spirit that I've started this podcast. I want to tell those stories. I don't want to tell my own story. That's on my blog. If you want to check that out, it's in the show notes. I want to tell your stories. I want to get the stories out there, and I want to start the conversation about the danger that QAnon and Q-adjacent ideas are posing to families all over the world. This is not just an American thing. I am a Canadian, and my parents are Canadian. So our first story is about Bruce Gurenser. He's from Ohio. Let's get started. Like me, Bruce has lost a loved one to QAnon. I was alerted by drained bank accounts and a refusal to get vaccinated. Bruce's concern began when he noticed his son was stockpiling weapons. What he would come to find out is that his son had joined a militia. One so concerning that it earned itself the label of terrorist group in Canada in 2021. But the story begins much further back, before the internet, long before QAnon, and before his son joined a militia and started stockpiling weapons. Bruce was a normal, small-town American dad who happened to be a pastor. Hailing from rural northwest Ohio, he was the son of young parents, but such was the norm back then for deeply religious families, and Bruce's family was certainly that. Life was otherwise very status quo for Bruce and his family in those early years. So things started to take a change when Bruce was around 5 years old. That's when his parents uprooted the whole family and moved them to sunny San Diego. For most, this might feel like a step up, migrating from chilly Ohio winters to the baking sunny summer days of California's southern coast. But for Bruce's family, it was a stepstone to religious fundamentalism, an ideology that would color the rest of Bruce's life.
It's where my parents got involved with Scott Memorial Baptist Church in San Diego, and it was pastored by Tim Lahaye at the time. Got involved with the John Birch Society and a lot of right-wing extremist groups.
So if you're not familiar with Tim Lahaye, the man was a prolific Christian author who penned gruesome novels about the end of days. His stories detailed grisly mass murder and warned of the punishments that awaited those who didn't follow God's commandments. The man was an outspoken opponent of the LGBTQ community and wholeheartedly accepted outlandish conspiracy theories that most of us would barely accept as a movie plot. The John Birch Society is less religious and more political. Firmly on the right side of the spectrum, this group found its foothold in the 50s opposing communism. They were hostile towards the civil rights movement and equal rights for women. The narrative that this society pushed was that leftists were conspiring to destroy everything Americans held dear. There are some people who claim that the John Birch Society have over 100,000 members today, and that they had some kind of a hand in molding the Trump administration, but I'm not entirely convinced about how true that is. But there, in the welcoming sunshine of San Diego, Bruce's family would find their place in Tim Lahaye's flock and sink deeper and deeper into fundamentalist ideals and conspiratorial thinking.
From there, we were go to church 3 times a week family.
In the years that followed, religion became the center of Bruce's life and the nucleus of his family. Everything was done in the context of the church. This all culminated in Bruce's teen years after he and his family moved back to Ohio, and he felt he was being called to preach.
Got involved in a large independent Baptist church there, and I made a profession of faith. And a couple weeks later, went back forward and told the church that I believed God was calling me to preach.
So off to Bible school Bruce went, where he studied hard to become a pastor and was fortunate enough to meet the love of his life.
I went to Bible college, and there I met Polly.
44 years later, and Bruce and Polly are still together, the proud parents of 6 children and 13 grandchildren. Polly made it no secret that she'd gone to school specifically to meet a pastor. The couple was heavy on religion as they raised their kids, who were all homeschooled for most of their grade school education.
Whatever they do or don't know, I guess it's our fault.
But something must have clicked during all of that homeschooling, because all of Bruce and Polly's kids have done very well for themselves. Each went on to celebrate success in post-secondary school. They all have college degrees. And Bruce points out that their many successes didn't end there.
Children have done well. They have good jobs.
Perhaps the success of their children was due in part to the fact that Bruce and Polly relieved them of the stringent religious expectations in the early years of the new millennium. That's when cracks had begun to form in Bruce's faith after he considered that the Bible might not be what he had always imagined it was.
In 2008, after 25 years in the ministry, I deconverted, and from that time forward, I've considered myself an atheist.
Not so long after Bruce realized he no longer believed in God, his wife followed suit. Together, they sat their kids down and told them that he and their mother would no longer be going to church. He and Polly made it clear, though, that they would support whatever choices the kids made regarding their faith going forward. Today, Bruce and Polly live in a small, conservative, religious town in northwestern Ohio with a population of just over 300 people.
I enjoy country life. I don't like the politics. 70% of the county that I live in voted for Donald Trump in 2016. They turned right around and did it again in 2020.
Unlike a lot of us these days, Bruce and Polly don't let religion or politics stop them from enjoying the company of their neighbors.
Politics and religion aside, generally my neighbors are good people. There's just very few of us that are progressive, liberal, Democrat, whatever label you want to put on it.
His children are all grown now, most of them with children of their own. Bruce and Polly enjoy a tight-knit family with family get-togethers every holiday and birthday, and everyone living close by.
Like on Labor Day, all of the children and the grandchildren are over here at our house, and we, for the most part, get along. And there can be the typical sibling moments, where they, especially if they've had a couple beers, sometimes that can, be problematic. But, kids are kids, even if they're in their 40s and their 30s now. So, but yeah, we're close, and I typically see most of my children fairly often.
Despite the tight bonds of his family, Bruce's relationship with one of his sons is not all it could be. When we come back, how Bruce discovers his son has been drawn into QAnon. If you're a patron of the Q Dropped podcast, you're going to get instant access to bonus material from this episode as well as all future episodes. Bonus material may include extras that didn't make it to the final cut, as well as video content of the interview being recorded. We might even throw in some patron-only episodes from time to time. Pledges start at just $3 per month, so sign up now at the link in the show notes. If you want to support our podcast for free, please rate and review it on your favorite podcast platform. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and like the video on YouTube, as well as leave a comment for the algorithm gods. All of this really helps us out, and it helps us to get the podcast out to more people. Of course, you can also send the podcast to people in your life who you think might appreciate this show. Thank you in advance. Now back to the episode. Listen, Bruce loves his son. You can hear it in his voice. Even as he tells me about some of the beliefs his son has adopted that terrify Bruce, he's proud of him. From Bruce's description, his son sounds smart, resourceful, selfless, and compassionate.
If you met my son and didn't know anything about his beliefs, you would think that he's a wonderful man and that he's a hardworking guy. He's polite and nice and go out of the way to help you. It's been on more than one occasion it snowed 6 or 8 inches here, and before I'm even out of bed, I'll look out the window and there's my son, shoveling my driveway and sidewalks off.
His son had never been political. Bruce told me that his son didn't even vote before 2020. But it was the pandemic and the mainstream emergence of QAnon that changed all of that.
But in 2020, all of a sudden I noticed a big change in the things that he was posting on Facebook. I mean, a big change. All of a sudden, the kid that was never political a day in his life, ever, didn't even vote. All of a sudden, he had become very political. And it quickly escalated. And it wasn't long before he was espousing right-wing beliefs and QAnon conspiracies, and he was a militia member, the 3 Percenters.
Despite the fact that their website assures us that they are not a militia and not anti-government, the 3 Percenters are fooling no one. This group got their name from false claims about the American Revolution, which isn't an impressive start. It was said that the American forces that actively stood up to the English monarchy never amounted to more than 3% of the colonists. This claim, of course, has been debunked, and if you want to know more, there's a link in our show notes. The 3 Percenters was conjured in the mind of a member of the Oath Keepers, which is, of course, another far-right militia group that spouts anti-government rhetoric. The 3 Percenters was their response to Obama's election. Of course, they also swear on their website that they do not discriminate against anyone, but a steady stream of abhorrent and vile comments from countless members seem to contradict that statement. This group has been called out by critics as one of the most dangerous contemporary extremist groups and was declared a terrorist entity by the Canadian government in June of 2021. The 3 Percenters are, first and foremost, concerned with gun rights, which means it should come as no surprise that most members are armed to the teeth, including Bruce's son.
He started buying firearms and ammunition and a bulletproof vest, and his logic behind that was that, you don't know what's coming. We got to be ready. We got to be ready.
As any loving parent would, Bruce became quite worried. He started to push back on some of the ideas his son was proposing. He would question these new far-right ideas out of sheer concern and fatherly love. When he would post crazy stuff, I would respond, and say, hey, this is what the facts say about this, or, hey, here's a news article that suggests that, what you posted is not correct. It quickly became apparent to Bruce that the effort was futile.
I just reached a place where that wasn't working. Nothing I said was working whatsoever.
Bruce tells me that their inability to see eye to eye led to a falling out.
We were estranged for a time because of, he was adamant that he had to carry his gun wherever he went, and I said, well, you cannot bring a gun into our house. You just can't. You got to lock it in your car. And that was non-negotiable for me. I've got 13 grandkids running around here. They'll run up to their uncle and horsing around. Next thing you know, they've knocked that gun out of its holster. And I'm not necessarily anti-gun. Sometimes people talk to me, they might think that I am, but I was raised around guns. My dad owned a gun store. I owned guns for years, and though I don't own any now, but that the gun itself is not the issue. It's the ideology behind it, the psychology of the person who has the gun. Those are the things, that concern me.
Though his son has since agreed to lock his firearm in his car or leave it at home when he visits, nothing has stopped Bruce from worrying about his well-being.
But here's what I'm afraid of, is that someday, because he's a very passionate man, and always has been, even as a child he was. And I'm afraid that someday he's going to get into a circumstance where, as part of his militia group or some other group he may be a part of, and that there's going to be some call to action and, bring your guns, type thing. And what happens, things like that can turn bad so quickly. And the next thing you know, my son is sitting in prison, because of something that he's done. And, my grandkids are without their father. And there's also a great risk that things could go very, very, very wrong.
Today, Bruce enjoys visits from his son again, though the extremist ideas he embraces lurk just below the surface.
He knows I disapprove. He knows that his siblings disapprove. And so I think to some degree that's driven, at least around family, that's driven his beliefs underground to some degree.
But that doesn't mean the subject doesn't come up at all.
But it pops up. For example, we had like I said, a family gathering on Labor Day, and he and his girlfriend were over, and somehow the price of EpiPens came up. And it was outrageous that EpiPens were so expensive, and here we give drug addicts, we give them Narcan free. And that led to just this diatribe that basically I took from it. Basically, you're saying we should just let the drug addicts die, because, they're not worth saving. And it was and it's that kind of stuff that what do you do with this? And I took the approach in that discussion, well, don't you think all of those things should be affordable? Yes, EpiPens cost too much money, but maybe the issue is to make sure that those are affordable along with the Narcan. And it didn't say anything more, and it was time to change the channel.
For Bruce, the strangest part of all of this is that his son went back to church.
I mean, he had been out of church for years. Even before I deconverted, he was not a church-going guy.
Bruce's son isn't the only one in the family who's been consumed by QAnon. Bruce tells me his ex-daughter-in-law, the mother of two of his grandchildren, is even deeper into the Q rabbit hole than his son.
She is deeply, deeply, deeply embrace these various conspiracy theories, many of which are put out by QAnon. And so much so that the problem with her is how her believing these things affects my grandchildren. And I mean, look, she believes that lizard people are walking on the face of the earth. She believes there's a portal in the sky, and they go back and forth in and out of that portal. And it seems like with her, whatever crazy, lame conspiracy comes down the pike, she embraces that.
Bruce thinks one of the exacerbating factors in both his son and his ex-daughter-in-law's interest in QAnon and Q-adjacent theories is the COVID-19 pandemic. Like many other QAnon believers, they think the COVID-19 vaccine is causing people harm. Neither his son nor his ex-daughter-in-law is vaccinated against the virus.
My ex-daughter-in-law, she's into homeopathy and all. Her big religion is essential oils. That they'll cure everything known to man.
For years, Bruce has struggled with chronic medical conditions that cause round-the-clock pain and discomfort. Despite lacking a medical degree, his ex-daughter-in-law is sure she has the cure.
If I would just use the right essential oils, I'd be well overnight.
Of course, this is not true, and though some essential oils are harmless and others can make your home smell amazing, others are not and have been known to cause painful side effects and injuries like chemical burns. It's crucial to get a doctor's advice before using essential oils for medical purposes. Bruce, of course, just smiled and nodded with no intention of trying this miracle cure. After the break, Bruce tells us what he thinks attracted his son to the QAnon narrative.
The Q Drop podcast is produced by Porthos Media, a Canadian independent audio, video, and written content company. If you are in need of audio or video production, editing, or copywriting, visit www.porthosmedia.net. The Q Drop podcast theme song, Mother of Alice, is written, performed, and produced by Porthos Media, so get in touch if you need original music for your upcoming project.
When asked what he believes drew his son into his fringe beliefs, Bruce said he felt it gave him a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging.
This is something that means something of value to him.
Joining a militia and arming himself, Bruce says, provides something else.
Yeah, it gives him a sense of control and being in charge, and it's a sense of power.
As a concerned parent, even to an adult, Bruce has thought a lot about what might have led his son down this rabbit hole.
And, and I have to put some of the blame on myself because of how he was taught and things that he heard growing up and saw modeled by me. And so what you have in evangelicalism is not all evangelicals by any means, but you have a strong anti-government, anti-science, anti-intellectual view of the world. And so when you think that that the government is this evil entity that, is trying to control the world, and that, the Trilateral Commission and the Illuminati and all these various groups are, they're causing mass delusion, and so you've stumbled on the truth, and you've been enlightened. And so there's almost this Gnostic idea that you've come into some form of enlightenment that other people haven't. I know my son has told me, he says, Dad, I don't understand why you can't see these things. And I think he sincerely believes that. He knows I'm a smart guy. I'm an educated guy. I'm a man of books. He knows that I read and I write, and that's all I've ever done his whole life. And so it confuses him that I just don't see what he sees. They're at a higher plane of understanding. And that does then give them meaning and purpose.
For many people with QAnon loved ones, including myself, this feels like an insurmountable problem. Like any attempt to pull them out of their delusions is entirely futile. There simply doesn't seem to be an answer. No effective tactic for helping someone deep in the throes of the QAnon fantasy see reason. For Bruce, this is the most frustrating aspect of all of this.
What do you do to fix that? Grab them by the shirt and bang their head up against the wall and say, hey! My son has really gone down that rabbit hole, which there seems to be, I haven't found any way to drag him back from it whatsoever. And I think it's because I'm not sure he views me as a someone that has anything to offer in that regard. He knows I'm a liberal and a progressive and an atheist and all these, in his world, these pejorative labels that they put on people.
Another thing that Bruce and I have in common is that we haven't entirely given up on our loved ones.
You know, I'm hoping that somewhere along the line, he's going to run into somebody that just might help him pull back from the edge of the abyss.
While many people who have lost a loved one to the Q cult have good reason to draw a line and go no contact, Bruce, like me, doesn't see a reason for that just yet.
Because the older you get, you realize you're short on life, and you really want to have those relationships with family. Look, we value the relationships, and so we're going to go out of our way to, we don't want to offend, we don't want to cause problems, we don't want to cause estrangement, and so, you know, we just either ignore some things, or our response is very, very low key, you know, to where, you know, it's not going to get, you know, someone all wild about something that we've said.
If there's one thing that seems to be universal among everyone I've spoken to with QAnon loved ones, it's this sentiment. The fact that we can no longer talk to them about deeper, more meaningful things. Religion is off the table. Politics is a no-go. Our conversations are restricted to surface material only. How's the weather? Did you see the football game? Who's going to win, Big Brother? When you've gone from a close, trusting relationship to one full of distrust, doubt, and walking on eggshells, the connection is forever changed.
There are things we can't talk about that, and I don't like that. I wish there was a time I think we could be more open about the things that we talk about. You know, we don't see him as much as we used to. And so that means we don't see his children, you know, as much as we used to. And that even bothers us even more, because, you know, we want to play a part in our grandchildren's lives.
Naturally, Bruce worries about the future, not just for his son, but for the broader world as a whole.
Now these beliefs have real-world implications, politically, socially, and they're causing division in families and affecting public policy and public health. As an increasing number of QAnon believers are elected to public office, Bruce feels our collective future may not be so bright. Here locally, we have a problem with QAnon-friendly people, you know, trying to take over school boards. And they're running for school board offices. And well, certainly they should have their say at the local school board meeting, you know, but we need to do all we can to make sure that they don't have any influence or power, you know, because they can cause untold harm. His main fear is that people will ultimately get hurt. I can't say I disagree. My fear is that there's going to be an issue. There's going to be something that they're going to latch on to an issue that's going to so capture the mind of Q supporters that it leads to violence. Of course, we've already seen the QAnon ideals manifest as violence in the real world. And you saw the QAnon signs, you know, at the Capitol. I mean, if I'd have told you on January 5th do you think that any group of people would try to overthrow the U.S. government? He said, no, of course not. You know, we believe in law and order. We believe in the orderly transfer of power and all those various things. Well, boy, our thinking has changed now. And imagine if a lot more of those insurrectionists had been armed, how that could have turned. And it could have got ugly quickly. And there would have been a lot of carnage and a lot of death.
What lays ahead of us, Bruce fears, could be bleak.
As an old man, I have a hard time recognizing the world that I now live in as far as that stuff is concerned. We used to have a common understanding of certain things, it seemed, even though there were political and religious differences. But boy, those days are over. There's sometimes I feel we're just right at the precipice that there's going to be something come along that just pushes us over the edge, and then we're in trouble.
I asked Bruce if he had any advice for those of us dealing with QAnon loved ones.
I think you have to be patient. I think you have to try to love them where they are, and as much as possible. I mean, there are things that can, come up with QAnon ideology that make relationships very difficult, if not impossible. But I think we have to go the extra mile, and hoping that by doing so, you've kind of left that door just cracked open a little bit, and that maybe in time there'll be something that happens. Hopefully it's not something that lands them in jail or causes them to get injured, but that causes them at least to some degree reevaluate their beliefs. And so you don't ever want to slam the door shut. And it's really easy to do that. I'm sure sometimes it gets so damn frustrating that you just want to say, you know what, I'm tired of this. I don't want to talk about it. You want to believe that crazy stuff, you go ahead and believe it. I'm not going to talk about it. But I don't think that that's the best way to do.
Bruce assures us we cannot give up. In true humanist form, Bruce sees a shared reality as something that we all should fight for.
It may be a futile battle, but we still have to fight.
I want to thank Bruce for joining me for this chat. You can watch some of this in video format, as well as parts that were edited out that will all be on our Patreon. The link is going to be in the show notes, as is Bruce's blog, where he writes about politics and religion. I hope you enjoyed the first episode of the Q Dropped podcast. This was such a huge undertaking, but we're really proud of it. In the next one, we'll talk to Hale, who is, as I speak, taking steps to go no contact with his QAnon parents.
That's why yesterday I did all the advanced directive power of attorney paperwork. So 2 of my friends are now my power of attorney and my backup. I wrote down everything I want to happen. And, if I'm in a coma, if I'm unconscious, if I can't make decisions, here's how I want, my medical decisions to be handled. If I die, here's how I want it handled, all this stuff, because I know if I was in the hospital unconscious, my mom would take me home and she would do natural remedies on me to try to make me better.
Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform or YouTube to be notified when that goes live. Links are in the show notes. Also, if you like this podcast, help us reach other people who might benefit from it. Rate and review it on Apple Podcasts and other podcasting platforms. Give it a thumbs up on YouTube and leave a comment. We absolutely want to hear from you. I'm Courtney Hurd, and thank you for listening.